Hi, thanks for tuning in to Vlogmas, aka Creepy Christmas. Today it will be day 9, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this piece with you. I really appreciate you tuning in, and we're gonna get started. I guess I have always been afraid of Santa. The man in the chair in front of Sarah is sitting up almost too straight. It looks awkward, unpleasant. She's guessing he's as uncomfortable with this situation as she is. Dr. Hahn doesn't look up from his notepad, which is leaning on his knee as he talks to her. Really? Yeah, it was sort of my thing growing up. Other kids were scared of the dark, or monsters, or clowns. For me, it was always Santa. Really, he repeats, this time more as a statement than a question. Yes, really. I mean, what's not to be afraid of? He's creepy. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. That's really scary, don't you think? She knows it will be an uphill battle with this guy, but she needs him to understand where she is coming from. She doesn't need him to judge her or even to look at her the way he is right at this moment. And why do you feel that way? He asks with a deep sigh as his eyes return to the notepad. I guess it started when I was 8. The first memory I have of Santa is from when my mom took me to the mall. You know, Merritt Square Mall on Merritt Island. I know that mall, yes. Well, then you probably know that every year they, like most malls, have a Christmas exhibit where you can meet Santa. And that year my mom decided to take me. Well, that's not exactly true. She decided we should go Christmas shopping. And then I saw the exhibit with Santa and his elves up on the big stage and started to beg her to let me go sit on his lap and tell him what I wanted for Christmas. Like most kids do. Yes, exactly. So you weren't afraid up until then? No, but I have no memories of any Santa in my life earlier than that. You never saw him at your house? You never accidentally snuck out and saw him eat the cookies and drink the milk? No, I was always sleeping, I guess. Okay, let's get back on track. So you got in line, and then what happened? Sarah sighs. She really doesn't feel like telling this story, but she has to. She needs to. I got in line and waited for a very long time till it was my turn. It took maybe half an hour, and I was dying of excitement. I wanted to tell Santa how much I wanted a Game Boy. My brother got one the year before, and I wanted one so badly. It was like the biggest thing back then. Dr. Hahn clears his throat. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. Sarah says, I do that sometimes. I'll get to the point. Please do. When it was finally my turn, I walked up to the man in the big red suit, my stomach exploding in butterflies, and sat in his lap. Sarah pauses. She sucks in air between her teeth and prepares herself to go back to that day, even though she doesn't want to, even though it scares the crap out of her. Ho, 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 so what do you want for Christmas, little girl? The words and the laugh were both perfectly normal for a Santa, and everything about the situation was familiar and seemingly very innocent. I started to talk, to tell him about my brother and how he has a Game Boy and how my parents say they can't afford one this year, and I am really upset about that. And that's when I see it. See what? His fingers. What's wrong with his fingers? Sarah wrinkles her nose in disgust. He had these long nails. I noticed them when his fingers were drumming on his thigh. They were crooked and pointy and brown and so long. Dr. Hahn shrugs. What's wrong with that? Isn't he allowed to have long nails? Yes, of course, but there were other things as well, and curious as I was, I asked him about them. I asked, but Santa, what long nails you have? And then he replied, that's to be able to scratch myself on the back when it itches. Then I said, but Santa, what red eyes you have. And he answered, that's because I work so hard around Christmas and don't get enough sleep. So then I said, but Santa, what long teeth you have and pointy as well, and what is that in your white beard? Looks like blood. Blood? Dr. Hahn asks, and looks up from his pad. Yes, blood. There was blood in his beard. Dr. Hahn shrugs again. So maybe he bit himself or something. What happened next? He told me to go back to my parents. My mom said I was shaking when I got back to her. She didn't believe me, of course, and told me I was being silly. It does sound like you exaggerated a little bit, or let your imagination get the better of you, Dr. Hahn said dismissively, as children tend to do. That's what my mom said, but it gets worse. A lot worse. I'm not done with my story. How so? That Christmas night, I snuck downstairs when I heard a noise, and I saw him, in my living room. Was he kissing your mom? Dr. Hahn asks with a chuckle. Sarah ignores his remark. I saw those long, dirty nails sticking out from his sleeves. I was terrified of him and ran back to my room and shut the door. Panting, I leaned my ear against the door and listened. My parents slept in their room downstairs, so I couldn't get to them. I heard steps on the stairs, and at one point, I think he was right outside my door, because I could hear his heavy breathing behind it. It was almost like a wheezing. Maybe he was out of breath from the stairs, Dr. Hahn says, still sounding amused. He is quite heavy. Later, the breathing disappeared, and it all went quiet. When I thought it was safe, I opened the door and snuck into the hallway, my feet quiet across the thick carpet. I walked to my brother's room, where the door was left ajar. I pushed it open and looked inside. That's when I saw it. There he was. Santa bent over my brother's bed. Santa? I exclaimed. That's when he turned his head and looked straight at me, smiling from ear to ear, showing me his pointy teeth. They were covered in blood. My brother's blood. It says here in your file that your brother was found dead in his bed on Christmas morning, 1992. It says nothing here about blood. There was no obvious cause. They concluded it had to be sudden infant death syndrome. But he was 5, Doctor. He was no infant. Santa killed him, Sarah says, and lifts her head up from the couch. So you claimed, even back then when you were questioned about it by the police. Here we go again, she says and rolls her eyes. All of my life I have had to live with this. Everyone believed I had done it. The kids and teachers at school, the doctors, the police. Even my parents believed I had somehow killed my brother, just because I was in the room. Just because my parents found me there, bent over his dead body. Well, you were awfully jealous of him, weren't you? Dr. Hahn asks. You said so just before when you mentioned he had gotten a Game Boy, and you didn't. Who wouldn't be jealous? He was always their favorite. 3 years younger than me, and he gets a Game Boy when it was my biggest wish. Of course I was jealous. So, is it safe to say you resented him for being favored? Dr. Hahn concludes, taking off his glasses. I know what you're getting at, Sarah says, not falling for it. Santa killed my brother. End of story. Except it's not, is it? The end of the story? Sarah sighs and leans her head back on the couch. No, it's not. Tell me the rest. Okay, well, after the death of my brother, I developed a fear of Santa and dreaded every year when Christmas came around and he was everywhere. When I was 16, I met a boy I soon started to date. Rob was his name, and he was gorgeous. Captain of the lacrosse team, and tall and handsome. He was perfect, even had good grades. And he loved hanging out with me. It wasn't easy getting the boys to like me when my nickname was Sarah the Slaughterer, and when everyone thinks I killed my own baby brother. But with Rob it was different. I met him at my high school, Merritt Island High. He was new in town and didn't know those old stories, luckily for me. Then that year, when December came along, we were out for a walk in the park with my dog Scotty. It was almost sunset, and it was getting darker as we walked and talked about our future and how it would be awesome to live closer to the beach, maybe in Cocoa Beach on the canal one day. You know, buy one of those houses that are so close to the beach that you can ride your bike there or walk. Anyway, there we were, walking, chatting, and laughing, when suddenly I spotted something between the trees, something red. I stopped and pointed, my hand trembling. "What is it?" Rob asked. It looks like Santa," he said and waved. "Hi there, Santa." Santa waved back and pulled up his big stomach while exclaiming, "Ho, ho, ho." I grabbed Rob's shoulder. "Don't go there. Don't go to him." "Why not? It's Santa. He's the merriest guy on earth. You know, reindeer, the North Pole, and presents and stuff." My heart was pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe Rob didn't find it odd to meet Santa out there in the park late in the evening. There were no kids there at that time. The playground was empty. Why would he be there? "Maybe he has a present for us," Rob said, smiling and pulling my arm. "Come on." "No, don't." "What's wrong with you? Santa's the best. Don't you know that? Here, let me show you." Before I knew it, Rob ran towards Santa. I yelled at him to come back, then whimpered when I realized he was not going to listen. He turned around to look at me again, to make sure I knew it was going to be all right. He gave me a thumbs up and winked, and that's when it happened. Before Rob realized what was going on, Santa stuck 3 of his long nails into Rob's throat. He pierced them through his skin, and poked a hole in an artery. Blood started spurting out like a sprinkler sprinkling water. It says here Rob Wilson disappeared on a walk with you in Austin Park on December 15, the year 2000. According to the police file, you reported him missing at 5 minutes past 6 in the evening, and you stated he was taken by Santa Claus. Dr. Hahn looks at Sarah above his glasses. I know what you're thinking. No one believed me that time, either. No one else had seen Santa between the trees. No one had seen him attack Rob. There wasn't even a body, Dr. Hahn remarks. No, they searched everywhere, but never found him. And why is that? I watched Santa drag him in between the trees and never saw him again. I screamed, but no one heard me. When Santa had taken him away, I was all alone with Scotty. I called my parents, and they came to get me. But since there was no body, you weren't convicted of anything. You did spend time in a mental institution, though. My parents told me they couldn't have me at the house anymore. They were scared of me, of what I might have done. So they sent me there, yes. I spent 2 years in there, telling the same story over and over again, but still no one believed me. I eventually gave up on convincing people that Santa was dangerous, and started telling them what they wanted to hear. That I had imagined the whole thing, that there had been no Santa. They let me go, stating I was cured of hallucinations and paranoia. I moved away to Cocoa Beach and started working as a waitress, then moved on to become a secretary at a newly started company that shaped surfboards. I stayed under the radar and tried to forget everything about my past. I kept scarce contact with my parents since they were terrified of me. Little by little, I put it behind me and convinced myself that I had just imagined things, that none of it had ever happened. Some years later, I met a nice guy, John, and we moved in together, then later married. He had been a professional surfer, but had to stop because of a back injury. He was running a surf school. I became part of his business, and we worked together with the kids. It was awesome. I never spoke to him about my past. Luckily for me, he wasn't too fond of Christmas either, so we didn't really celebrate it and would often travel to places like Costa Rica where he could surf instead. For a long time, it was all good and I didn't have to worry. But then Molly came along. Your daughter, right? Asked the doctor. Yes, our precious baby girl. Never had I been happier. It was like everything bad went away and life was good again. Like it had been when I was a child. The world was a good place. Having a child even improved my relationship with my parents since they wanted to be closer to their only grandchild. When Molly was an infant, it wasn't really a problem, but soon she started to ask questions. It's hard to ignore Christmas when you have a 4-year-old who sees the decorations and hears the carols on the radio. Even the TV is filled with cartoons about elves and, of course, about Santa. not to mention all the stuff they filled him with at preschool. Soon she was asking about him, wondering if he would come to her house this Christmas. What was I supposed to tell her? She quickly learned he only gave the good kids presents, and one night when I tucked her in, she grabbed my arm and asked me if she had been naughty all of her life. She asked if she was still a naughty kid. What was I supposed to say? I told her she was a very good kid, but she didn't believe me. Why doesn't Santa come to my house then? Doesn't he like me? So I told her Santa wasn't real. I told her we didn't believe in Santa, just to make it easier, to avoid the questions. I lied. Sarah covers her face with her hands and tries not to let herself get too emotional. Telling a story is tough, a lot tougher than she thought it would be. She can tell by the look on Dr. Hahn's face that he doesn't buy into it, but she is used to that. She learned that at a very young age. Under different circumstances, she would just lie to him, but she can't this time. She needs to tell him the truth. People need to know what really happened. They need to know what they're dealing with, what kind of evil they're letting into their homes at night while they're sleeping. Finally, she lowers her hands. "Can I get some water?" she asks. "All this talking makes me thirsty." "Of course," Dr. Hahn says, gets up and walks to a small table with bottles of water. He hands her one, and she sits up. She drinks greedily with her eyes closed. Her hands are shaking. Some of the water spills on her chest. "So, you told your daughter Santa wasn't real?" Dr. Hahn says when she puts the bottle down. Sarah swallows the water and lies down again on the couch. She closes her eyes and tries to go back. At the time, it seemed like a good idea. John didn't agree with it, though. He didn't like lying to her. He didn't understand how anyone could dislike Santa. But I had to lie to her, to protect her. I told her the man at the mall was nothing but a man in a suit, dressing up as Santa, that Santa didn't exist. Of course, Molly went and told everyone in her preschool, and I was called to a conference, and later had to tell her not to tell anyone, since she made all the children cry. But other than that, it didn't pose any significant problems. I have a feeling that it didn't remain that way. No, Sarah says. For about 2 years she let it go, but as she grew older, she started to talk about him again, stating that everyone else believed in Santa. Why didn't we? Telling us that if we only believed in him, he would come. He would bring her presents too. She begged us to take her to the mall to sit on Santa's lap. I forbade it, but when she turned 7 years old, John couldn't stand the pressure anymore. Without my knowledge, he took her to the mall and told her not to tell Mommy because Mommy didn't like Santa. How did you find out? I saw them. I drove past the mall on my way home from yoga class and saw John's car in the parking lot. I don't know why I stopped. I mean, they could have just been shopping, but something told me I had to stop. Maybe it was the fact that they hadn't told me they were going to the mall. Maybe it was intuition. All I know is a small voice inside of me told me something was up, and I was right. I parked the car close to theirs and rushed inside the mall. I didn't have to look for long before I spotted them. I will never forget the shock I got. Can you imagine? They were in the line to see Santa. How did that make you feel? Dr. Hahn asks. Sarah sits up. How do you think that made me feel? I was angry and scared, of course, terrified. You didn't think that you were overreacting slightly? No, not after what I've been through. Haven't you been listening to my story? I have, yes, but didn't you think about the hundreds of kids that sit on Santa's lap every year that nothing happens to? Couldn't you let it go, for Molly's sake? Sarah leans over towards Dr. Hahn and points a finger at him. Listen to me, Doctor. I know what you think of me. I know you think I am a cuckoo, and I'm fine with that. But don't for 1 minute think I am letting any of this go. I am not letting him get away with this. Never. I will tell my story till I can't speak anymore. So what did you do? I ran to them. It was Molly's turn, and the elf had grabbed her hand and told her to follow her. I watched as she approached Santa, and he smiled at her. With terror rushing through me, I stormed towards her, yelling for her to stop. The crowd heard me and several heads turned. A mom pulled her son away from me. I knew I sounded like a crazy person. I knew I risked that everyone in my neighborhood would see me, but I didn't care. I simply couldn't let her go to him. Why not? Dr. Hahn says. It was out in public. What did you fear would happen? Would you let your kid sit in the lap of a vicious killer? Sarah asks. If Ted Bundy lured your child with promises of candy and presents? I don't think so. I know how this all sounds to you, Doctor. Believe me, I know. But you asked me to tell the story, so if you just let me tell it. Dr. Hahn nods. Go ahead. Sarah exhales. Okay, well. I ran towards the stage where Santa was sitting in his chair, his hands with his long nails already reaching out for my daughter as she approached him. I didn't make it to her before she turned and sat in his lap, his red eyes lingering on her throat. Ho, 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 I heard him say as she leaned back into his beard. Have you been good this year? Molly leaned over and whispered in his ear. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could tell Santa nodded and smiled, showing off his pointy corner teeth as she spoke. Then he laughed, that deep rolling laughter, and said something back to her, whispered something in her ear, his long claws grabbing her hair and pulling it aside so she could better hear. I screamed and clawed my way through the crowd, pushing moms and dads and even children aside. For a second, my eyes locked with my husband's, and I could see terror in them. No, Sarah, stop, he yelled. I didn't listen. I ran past him. He tried to grab me and stop me, but I managed to get past him. Then I stormed onto the stage. I was panting and out of breath, but still managed to yell at Santa sitting there in his red suit, black shiny boots, and white beard. I grabbed my daughter's arm and pulled her away from him. You get your dirty claws off her, you bastard, I yelled. Molly ended up on the floor. She was crying, and my husband sprang to get her. Meanwhile, I clenched my fist and slammed it into Santa's cherry red nose, knocking him backwards so hard the chair tipped, causing him to fall into the curtain behind him and down from the stage. A loud gasp went through the crowd. Someone screamed. Children cried and yelled at me, and soon 2 or 3 of the mall's security guards were on top of me, pinning me down. The police came and everything. They kept me for hours, asking me questions. It was even in the newspaper that a crazy mother had attacked Santa at the mall. They had pictures of the poor, chubby Santa with his bloody nose. I never spoke to them. Luckily, no one pressed charges against me. I was told to never come back to the mall and to stay away from Santa, that was all. But that is not where the story ends, is it? Dr. Hahn says with a tired sigh. Not at all, Doctor. Not at all. John never forgave me for what happened at the mall. For 2 weeks, I was the talk of the neighborhood, and at school the other moms told their kids not to play with Molly. They took away my status as volunteer because I had been arrested, and none of the other moms wanted to power walk with me on the beach or meet up for coffee like we used to. I had one neighbor who came to my door and asked me if I had time to talk out on the porch. We sat in the swing. You do realize everyone around here is talking about you, right? She said. They're even planning on not letting you go to the Christmas parade, you know, since Santa rides the fire truck. You have them all scared. Why? Why would you attack Santa at the mall? I stared at her for a long time, not knowing what to tell her. I appreciated that she was the only one who dared to confront me about it instead of just talking about me behind my back like everyone else. But I had no answer at hand, not one she would accept. My silence made her draw her own conclusion. She leaned forward smugly and whispered, So, is it true then? John really is gay? What? It's really none of my business anyway, but just a piece of advice. If John sleeps around, then you should punch him instead. That's what I did to Steve when I found out he had that affair with our cleaning lady. Never slept with anyone else again. And then she left me. I was sitting on the swing, staring at her as she left, realizing I had no idea what just happened. I knew then that no one would ever believe me, no matter how loud I yelled, that all I could do was protect my own family. But not even my loved ones believed me. After the incident at the mall, I told John everything. I told him about what happened to my brother and about Rob, and that I believed Santa had killed them both. I thought he would believe me. I really did. I thought he would understand, but I was alone in this. And he made me promise to never tell Molly any of these crazy stories. He never looked at me the same way again. To him, I was simply a lunatic. And so it happened that 3 weeks after the incident at the mall, 3 days before Christmas, he left me. I came home from work that Thursday, carrying presents I had bought for him and Molly, and found the house empty. It was the scariest thing in the world. To open the front door and yell, "I'm home," and then have no one answer. At first, I thought they were just out. Of course I did, but then I found the note. He had left it on the kitchen counter, next to the sink. He simply wrote that he had left and taken Molly, and that they wanted to have a real Christmas this year. That Molly had written Santa a letter to excuse my behavior, and invited him to come. He also wrote that I shouldn't try to find them, and that with the record I had, there wasn't a snowball's chance in hell that I would ever get custody of our daughter. So, if I wanted to see her again, I had to prove that I wasn't crazy. That's basically what the note said. Oh, and it ended with a Merry Christmas. Of course I didn't stay away. Are you kidding me? How could I? The first 2 days, I stayed at my house, wondering what to do. But by Christmas Eve, I knew I couldn't leave it alone. John had written in the letter that they would stay with his mother till they found a new place, and so I went there to protect my daughter. It was, after all, Christmas Eve. I drove to John's mother's house at nightfall and parked the car outside on the street, hoping they wouldn't see me. Through the windows, I could see them eating dinner and see how Molly was having a great time. She enjoyed being away from me. It hurt like crazy to watch. Part of me wanted to leave them, to go drive into the river, because I missed her so much and couldn't bear having to live without her. But I knew I had to stay and protect her. I knew I was the only one who could. I had bought a sandwich that I ate and washed down with a Coke. Then I watched as they played charades. I enjoyed seeing my little daughter and the man I loved, but it also crushed my heart that I couldn't be with them. At some point, I must have dozed off, because I woke up to a dark house, the lights completely turned off. That was when I exited the car. I walked to the house and found the back door that I know John's mother never locks. Don't ask me why she doesn't, but it worked out well for me. I used it to get inside. I walked to the living room, where the decorated Christmas tree was standing next to the fireplace. I walked to the cabinet where I knew John's mother had her shotgun ready in case somebody tried to intrude. Maybe that's why she never locks the door. I grabbed the gun and sat in the recliner, ready for him. I was prepared to stay up all night to make sure he didn't get to my daughter. I knew it would cost me the rights to her if John found me there, but I didn't care. Her life was worth it. I almost dozed off again a few times, but I was brought fully awake by the sound of a loud thump on the roof of the house. My eyes grew wide, and I sat up in the chair facing the fireplace, cocked the gun, and pointed it at the fireplace. "Come on, dear Santa," I whispered in the darkness. "Come to me. Guess now you're the one who better watch out." Ash fell from the nooks and crannies of the chimney. It landed in the bottom of the fireplace and sent out charcoal smoke, filling the room with a strange burnt smell. For a few seconds, I wondered if I should light a fire, but then realized I wanted to face him. I wanted him to see me. I wanted to look into his bloodshot eyes. An explosion of gray smoke followed. Big lumps of ash fell to the bottom of the fireplace. It was followed by something big, a loud thud, and someone groaning. I thought, is that how he makes his entrance? Not very elegant for someone who has done this for centuries. As the smoke and ash cleared, I spotted his red suit amidst it. I lifted the shotgun to my shoulder and sighted him. Santa grunted again, got back on his feet, brushed off his suit, then coughed. I realized there was blood. It was coming from Santa's head. He had hurt himself in the fall. He wiped it away with another grunt, then grabbed his bag, turned, and looked directly at me. And that was when I pulled the trigger. I swear I didn't know. I swear. It wasn't until Santa fell backwards into the fireplace, a hand to his chest, blood gushing from the wound I had made, that I realized his beard had slid to the side. That's when I knew I had done something awful. I ran to his body, grabbed John's head, and put it in my lap. He was barely able to speak. She was terrified of Santa after the incident. You scared her. I wanted her to know, to show her there was nothing to be afraid of. To make matters worse, Molly had heard the commotion and, thinking it was Santa, which it sort of was, she had run down the stairs and was now standing behind me, screaming her lungs out. Dad! What have I done? I thought to myself, completely devastated. Please don't die, John, I whispered while I stroked his hair. Please don't die on us. We need you. John opened his eyes once again and looked at me with a sly smile. I knew you'd be my death one day, Sarah. I just knew it. Then his eyes rolled back in his head, and his head fell to the side. No, Dad! Molly screamed. Seconds later, John's mother came out as well. Her screams were terrifying and pierced through my bones. John, oh my God, what did that awful woman do to you, John? She pulled me away from him and took him into her arms, sitting on the floor, getting blood on her hands, crying, my daughter at her side, crying her heart out as well. I had no idea what to do, how to react. I was devastated, completely broken. I couldn't stay in that house anymore, so I ran outside, threw up on the lawn, and went for my car. But you didn't make it very far, Dr. Hahn says. No, one of the neighbors had heard the shot and called the cops, and seconds later they had surrounded my car and I got out. From another perspective, one might think you were trying to escape, he says, to run from your actions. I wasn't. I just had to get out of the house, to get away. Dr. Hahn clears his throat. One might argue that it's the same thing. I wasn't trying to run from what I had done, Sarah says. I really wasn't. I knew I had done something horrible, but it was an accident. I promise you it was. You have to believe me. And just why do I have to believe you? Dr. Hahn asks. Why is that? Because you're the last one I'll ever get to tell about all of this. Dr. Hahn clears his throat, then leans forward. Sarah doesn't like the look in his eyes. Okay, here's the deal. I was asked by the court to make an evaluation of you, to see if you were even fit for a trial, mentally that is, or if they should simply lock you away in a mental institution for the rest of your life. You're being charged with first-degree murder of your husband. You've told me your version of the story. Here's what the rest of the world believes. They believe you killed your baby brother because you were jealous of him, then came up with the story of Santa killing him afterwards. When it comes to your boyfriend, Rob Wilson, you conveniently left out an important part of the story, didn't you? In your file, it says you had recently learned that he had cheated on you and slept with a cheerleader after a game. So that provides a very good motive for you to get rid of him as well. You learned at an early age how to get away with murder, so you thought you could do it again. Blame it on everyone's favorite person, Santa, the good and jolly Santa Claus. Finally, it is obvious you are angry with your husband for leaving you and taking your daughter away, so you went to his mother's house and killed him. What do you say to that? Sarah sits up straight, folding her shackled hands and placing them in the lap of her orange jumpsuit that is 2 sizes too big. I know exactly how the world sees me, what they think about my story, but what I need to know is that you have understood it. Why me? Like I said, you're going to be the last one I can tell. I know what the world thinks of me. I know they'll condemn me. I know I am headed for the needle. But what's important to me is for you to know the story and tell it. I need you to keep warning people about this monster. We let him into our homes. Every year, people welcome him like he's the cuddly teddy bear we are all taught to believe he is. But he's not. He's a vicious monster. I need to know that you'll tell people, that you'll warn them. Dr. Hahn looks at Sarah like he doesn't really know what to think. Then he points at her. Oh, you're good. You almost had me convinced there that you were, in fact, crazy. But you're not. You're just really clever. I'm not falling for it. You're perfectly fit for trial. There you have it. That's my verdict. Dr. Hahn presses a buzzer, and in come the guards who have been watching them through the one-way window. They grab Sarah by the arms. Please, Dr. Hahn, she screams desperately. Don't let him get away with this. He's a vicious killer, and people should know. Take her away. No, Dr. Hahn, please listen to my story. See the facts. Don't let your kids sit in his lap. Don't let them trust him. Her arms are hurting as they drag her out of the room. Just before the drawer closes, she yells, Can't you see? He's got us fooled. Santa is just an anagram for Satan. Dr. Hahn is still shaking his head as he crosses the parking lot. His Toyota is the only one left outside the prison. It is getting late. He can't wait to get away from here. The woman's story still gives him the chills. To think that anyone could be so cold as to blame Santa. To make up that kind of story about everyone's round and joyful childhood hero. Tisk, a bloodthirsty Santa. What has the world come to? Dr. Hahn has met many killers in his life, many of them cold-blooded, but this lady tops them all. He finds his keys in his pocket and unlocks the car. He gets in and puts his briefcase on the passenger seat. He thinks about his daughter, Trisha. He has promised to take her to see Santa at the mall this coming weekend, and can't wait to see her precious face when she sits on Santa's lap. Dr. Hahn shakes his head again. What a day. He doesn't like to have to send people to death row, but that is where she'll be going. He had really hoped this woman would turn out to be insane, but she was way too collected to be crazy. He didn't see the traits of someone hallucinating or any paranoia in her. Nope, none whatsoever. She had just made up this story to make sure she wouldn't have to go to trial, but she hadn't counted on meeting him. He's the expert when it comes to evaluating people like her. He has so many clients at the prison. He has his own office there. Dr. Hahn sighs and is about to put the key in the ignition when he spots something on the dashboard. What is that? A note? I don't remember leaving a note there. He picks it up and reads it. It simply says, Better watch out. Dr. Hahn wrinkles his nose and reads it over and over again, but still can't make any sense of it. Is it some cruel joke? That's when he hears it. It's creeping up behind him, slowly sneaking closer, the sound of someone laughing. But not like normal people laugh. The way only one person in this entire world laughs. He looks into the rearview mirror and sees him. There he is, wearing his red hat and with his cherry red nose, bloodshot eyes and pointy teeth, grinning from ear to ear, his chubby hands lifted, the long, claw-like nails ready to rip into his throat. Santa? Alrighty then. That was intense and morbid and a little depressing. So, just a thing for Christmas. Yeah, so if you want to check out more of the author's work, make sure that you check out the links in the description. If you want to hear more spooky holiday tales, make sure that you subscribe or follow the channel. I look forward to sending you a new video tomorrow.